Hello everyone, this is Shadow. Due to copyright restrictions on YouTube, I can't publish many of the audiobooks you love. That's why I've created a special paid service where you can enjoy over 300 high-quality audiobooks from platforms like Webnovel, Pocket FM, Audible, Wuxia, and more. Each novel comes as a one-time purchase, no subscriptions, no hidden fees. After payment, you'll receive full access via Telegram, along with all future updates for that novel. You'll find a wide selection of your favorite genres and titles, always in premium audio quality. Check the full list of available novels in the description. DM me now to get your favorite stories in audiobook form and start listening today. Chapter 1382 Rue got a job? Once everyone learned that the king was at dinner early, the palace residents began to rush to the dining hall. There was talk of an announcement that had brought the king to the dining hall early, and much confusion about just what it could be on a day like this. There were no major international conflicts ongoing, they hadn't gotten any surprise visitors that anyone knew of, and there hadn't even been rumors about a big event that would necessitate an official royal announcement. But the nature of this one was nothing that any of them had expected. The guests rushed to their seats, leaving Carl and the senior royals as the last to be seated. But the king decided not to make the announcement right away, and the tension in the room built to a palpable level as the first round of drinks arrived. Carl smirked at the king's amused expression. Then the royal tapped his spoon on his glass, bringing silence to the room so that he could speak. Family, friends, loyal subjects. Today is a most wonderful day. Two important events have been presented to me, and I will share them with you now. First, the youngest of my daughters has advanced far enough in her class progression that she has been granted an official role within the palace. Princess Rue will be under the supervision of Crown Prince Lucas while she studies to take over as the head of palace training after he ascends the throne. The date for his ascension has not yet been set. However, my dearest Rue's position is directly related to the second bit of news I have to share with you today. Under the control of the Blue Dragons, a new training ground has been opened to all in the palace under totem rank. You may book space with the librarian, or you may drop in for a training session at your leisure. I have been informed that the space is currently limited. However, the extra training space is expected to reduce the load on our other training grounds, and to allow opportunities for high-level experience to those looking for advancement within the palace. The king paused to let his words sink in. Everyone had been distracted by the news of the new training area, as rumors of that had already spread through the palace. But the big news was actually that Rue would be taking over training within the palace after she was trained for the role. Currently, that position fell to the crown prince, and it would only be held by her in interim until there was a new crown prince qualified after the new king took the throne. But to those who were listening, it meant that Princess Rue was now considered to be firmly within the crown prince's inner circle, and under his protection. If she was not, then the role would have gone to another highly trusted military officer, or Nix, who was the crown prince's personal assistant. The king had essentially dropped a bomb on the dining hall, then turned everyone's face away from the blast. Head of training wasn't a hands-on position. They didn't do the training, they approved the training programs, as well as the members who were promoted to training positions. Anyone hoping to make drill sergeant, made supervisor, or senior journeyman in the trades would have to go through Rue once she took over. They weren't the top of their field, those positions were chosen by the king. But the one who stood at the top usually had to go through a few years training newbies before they were considered qualified to lead. It was a large part of what made the crown prince so influential, and it helped build loyalty to him as king. Everyone who was chosen to lead would have gotten their start as a trainer thanks to him. That favor would not easily be forgotten, and failing at that task would likewise be remembered by the new king when it came time to replace retiring staff. Rue was vibrating in her seat, with excitement, but the king wasn't quite finished yet. After the crowd quieted a little, he decided it was the perfect moment to toss a political hand grenade into the conversation. As young Rue has gained an avatar tier class, I would like to remind you all that her official status has changed. As an avatar and a direct descendant of the crown, her status is no less than that of any other royal official born from the royal family. He added, with splintered against stone as the queen rose from her chair and hurled it against the wall. The king didn't even flinch, he had seen this response coming. The queen only had nominal authority over the royal officials. She could discipline them for wrongdoing, but it required a written report and evidence. However, she could not dismiss them from their positions. Only the king could. She also could not appoint them. She could only request them, and the king appointed them for her. However, she didn't always get the one that she wanted. Some of the officials under her supervision as queen were spies planted by the king to ensure that the royal harem was running smoothly. Now, the candidates who were most likely to be picked by the king would not only be going through the crown prince, but also Princess Rue, who had every reason in the world to hate her. This was a complete disaster, from the queen's point of view. The room fell silent as the queen left, and it didn't take a genius to see that the power balance within the royal family was shifting, and she was not on the winning side. Not this time. It was no secret that the king had always favored Rue, though the queen despised her, and the other royals viewed her as a waste for not awakening at the usual time. But now that the queen had put on such a public display of her displeasure, the real challenges for power would start. Chapter 1383 Restless Night. The potential for retaliation from the queen's faction had Kara so excited that she hardly slept all night, desperately hoping that someone was going to break into their suite to attempt to assassinate the princess. There was only one problem with her plans to torment intruders. That being the simple fact that an excited and bloodthirsty chaos badger inside the room triggered everyone's danger senses so strongly that most of the potential troublemakers couldn't even approach the suite without breaking out in cold sweats, and the royal guards had to be moved 3 doors down the hall. They knew that it wasn't aimed at them, but it was a nightmare for their nerves. Being far less attuned to danger than the guards were, Rue slept like a rock and only climbed out of bed as the sun came up, long after Kara had calmed down and realized that nobody was going to try anything in the middle of the night. She still had hope that they would eventually, though. "Are you excited to start training with the crown prince?" Kara asked as she helped braid Rue's hair into an intricate mass that the palace maids were certain they would never be able to brush out again. In fact, at least 2/3 of that design appeared to violate at least one law of physics. "All right. I've gotten her as close to another advancement as I can. Now, you can send her off with the crown prince for job training, and I will show up at random for surprise combat readiness training," Kara declared. The maid looked horrified. "Please don't randomly attack the crown prince. The royal guard will take it the wrong way." Rue giggled, saying that only encourages her to do it. "Don't worry, sister. I will be back to work on my class skills just after lunch. The training program is only half a day, 5 days a week," Kara sighed. "All right, go play with the prince. I will be here, making upgrades to the illusion so that we can find new ways to train you this evening." Rue gave her an enthusiastic thumbs up before she was dragged out to start her first day of job training. Then Kara turned to Carl. "Are we planning something fun for this morning? Or can I go back to bed?" Carl shook his head. "I'm just working on a new spell that might be able to turn Rue into a dragon. I can probably teach her Avatar, since she's supposed to be a void avatar by class. But I was thinking something more interesting." Kara smirked as she sensed the details in Carl's mind from his experiments the day before, but she also knew that she didn't have to be around for the interim parts, so she headed to her pile of loot for a nap. 2 hours should do it. With that much, the Carl should be nearly finished making his skill, and then she would have time to convince him to alter the training area before Rue was back, and then she could sneak down to the kitchen to see if they had new snacks. Though this place was challenging to sneak around in. Back home, everyone kind of ignored her going where she pleased, but here in the palace they sent someone to track her down the moment that she left the room. Even when she flew out the window to explore, they still sent someone after her. So, returning to her space to sleep was the perfect way to pass the time and recharge her energy before it was time to forage for new and interesting things in the palace. "Snacks. I definitely meant snacks." Carl laughed as Kara wiggled on the pile of coins, trinkets, various city-branded keepsakes and magical items, then changed her mind and went to sleep in the ornate coffin that had once been a lich lord's phylactery. The combination of bestial raiment and beast form was coming along well, and Carl now had a complete skill, ready for merger. It focused on the amplification of one's inner aspects, which was as close as he could manage to getting a specific outcome. But if he was right, it should give you an epic grade form, fully clothed in a way appropriate to the situation. New skill learned, War Beast, Artifact Grade Transformation. Grants a fully armored bestial form with epic grade status. Carl stared at it for a moment. It sounded so simple, but how could it be when it was an artifact grade transformation spell? Plus, that spell name was not at all what he was expecting. Did he focus too much on the armor portions of the spell combination? Well, he couldn't argue too much. It worked, he had the new spell, so it was usable and possible teachable. "Are you going to try that? Or am I?" Kara asked lazily from her nap spot. "You know what? Why don't you do the spell testing for me? If you can use it, just transform and show off the form for a bit, so I can inspect it." Carl agreed. "Alter the room. If you wanted dragons, this might be big," she warned. Carl brought up the illusionary domain again, and set it to look like the training garden. Kara wouldn't actually be able to fight with anyone without causing issues, but it would at least let her test the new skill in private. Relative privacy, Carl realized, as he sensed a palace maid standing quietly in the corner. He could send her away, but that would only breed gossip, and so far, the rest of the palace had no idea what he had been doing, as it wasn't a visible process. Kara came out of her space in humanoid form, wearing short shorts and a crop top, barefoot. Carl laughed as she looked in a mirror to examine her appearance for the day with obvious satisfaction. He wasn't sure what look she was going for, but it seemed that she had found it. You know, I can use this spell on other people. Not just myself. This is pretty good, Kara announced. Oh? That is new. Neither of the spells it evolved from could be cast on others. You know, we should likely have Barry here for this. Carl noted. Kara smiled cheerfully. He might cry if we don't. You, dragon lady in the cute dress. Bring us the librarian. Chapter 1384 War Beast Testing. Carl laughed as the maid blushed and ran out of the room. But they were only a few floors above the library, and Barry was sure to be at work by now, so they wouldn't have to wait long once he knew that there was spell testing going on. We need one more person. Not a dragon, not a Carl. Kara decided. All right, we should be able to find that. Wait here for a second and I will ask the guards. Carl replied. He stuck his head out the door and waved to the guard at the end of the hall. Good sir, we have need of a volunteer for a spell test that is not a dragon. Preferably an elf or other humanoid. Not a beast, either. Carl called. Of course, sir. I will have one brought to you if the rank doesn't matter. Carl shook his head. We will be casting the spell on them, so the rank doesn't matter. All the guards and most of the maids were dragons. But the spell granted a beast form which would probably just turn them back into their default form, but tougher. Moments later, the guard arrived with Nyx and Barry behind him. Well, that works. I was not expecting you to grab the Crown Prince's advisor, but he meets the requirement. Thank you for your prompt effort. The guard smiled as he bowed. The pair had already been coming down the hallway, alerted by the maid that something was going on here. You have a new spell to test? Did I hear that right? Barry asked as soon as he was in comfortable speaking distance. Indeed. I have been working on researching it for some time, and now I believe that I have it working. So, with our friendly neighborhood Chaos Badger to nullify any unwanted effects, I am ready to test it. It should give an upgraded and armored beast form transformation. However, I'm not sure what will happen when I use it on different species. Carl offered. Barry was nodding eagerly as he took notes. Thank you for inviting me to be present for the first round of tests. Kara smiled at him, and the dragon frowned. I missed something, didn't I? Kara nodded eagerly. Thank you for your service. Then she cast War Beast on the librarian. Gone was the mild-mannered and aging man in blue robes. In his place stood a massive blue dragon, adorned with silver and crystal armor plating that covered the majority of his body, including blades on the leading edges of his wings. Ooh, epic blue dragon. Nice. Carl laughed as Kara cheered and motioned for Barry to do a spin so she could see all of him. Indeed, he was epic grade. His nameplate in the system interface had changed to the same silver outline version that dungeon bosses showed. The armor was also impressive in design, leaving only the membrane of his wings truly vulnerable. They couldn't be covered with armor, they needed to be modulated to fly properly. But other than that, the blue dragon was ready for war. Barry was doing his best to examine himself, but Kara was on a roll. Next to be transformed was the maid, who had just returned with the snacks and drinks. She transformed into a petite but muscular swamp dragon, covered in armor that looked like it was made of tree bark. Ooh, it is themed to the dragon. I like it. Carl nodded. It also doesn't change their rank or age, so it's not turning them into ancient dragons just to get the right power level. The maid laughed, and it turned into an amused roar that seemed to shock her. Wait, she was a dragonkin, right? Carl asked. The maid nodded eagerly, then delicately lifted her foot to examine the red nail polish that had transferred from her hands to the transformation. Nice. That is just what we wanted to happen. Were you always part swamp dragon? Or is the form unexpected? Carl asked, as Barry was still in self-research mode and not speaking. I am 1/4 swamp dragon. My mother is a half-dragon. She explained. So, it goes with the highest percentage of beast blood. Now to see what happens when we cast it on a demon. Kara smirked and Nyx looked panicked. How about you let Carl cast it on me? He suggested. He definitely did not trust the Chaos Badger not to turn him into something weird on purpose. Carl cast the spell, and Nyx began to glow, then shrank, and kept shrinking. When the spell finished, he was a white-furred ferret in shining silver armor. Still mythic rank, but weighing under 2 kilos. But Nyx hadn't noticed the size difference yet. He was admiring the soft white fur, while carefully brushing a few spots that were out of place. Kara laughed. We should have given him unholy beast form from the start. He is adorable. Is that what this spell is? Barry asked, drawn out of the inspection of his improved form by the potential for new knowledge. Carl shook his head. No, that is the spell that I used to look like a tengu. Can also make me a demonic crow. But look how happy the demon is in ferret form. Nyx ran up Barry's leg, chittering happily, before he realized that this form wasn't capable of speech. What is the point of an armored ferret? Barry asked, confused as to why the spell would have given the demon that form. Nyx concentrated on one of his skills, and the ferret form was surrounded in energy, floating in the air. Then he flashed out a few Ren-type attacks, before darting across the illusionary domain so fast that Barry's draconic eyes could barely track him. Oh, it's an agility-type transformation. I get it now. It's not about pure strength, but a dungeon boss that size and speed would be insidious. Nyx nodded his tiny head, and then curled up in Kara's arms. Nobody will ever expect the tiny combat ferret. But I would like to mention that even though the body is small, Nyx could still throw a human across the room in this form. Nothing compared to the physical might of an epic dragon, but not weak. She explained as she stroked the soft fur on his head. I wonder if Misty will let me keep him when we go? He's so soft. Chapter 1385 Cute Armor. When Rue came back from her morning training with Prince Lucas, the room was in chaos, with a gigantic blue dragon taking up half the garden, a swamp dragon sparring with the bunny maids, and a tiny white ferret chasing the chaos badger around the skies. What is happening? She asked Carl, who was reclining on a chair with a jug of chilled juice. Spell modification experiment. I think that we might have found a way for you to turn into a dragon before you get the avatar skill, which will let you take on void dragon form. He explained. Really? That would be wonderful. I saw the palace guard doing flight training today in dragon form, and I was so jealous. She sighed. Carl cast War Beast on Rue, and a distinctly childish void dragon appeared, covered in smooth onyx armor plates. She was just under 3 meters long, tiny for a juvenile dragon. But Rue was also still very small for her age, thanks to her slow-growing lineage. And now we have a draconic princess Rue. Rue cheered, and accidentally activated her breath weapon, sending a cloud of black mist into the air that Kara deliberately flew through to disorient Nyx. Kara. Look! I'm a dragon. Kara laughed as she landed, then transformed back into a humanoid to answer. Looking good. You're a genuine void dragon in this form. I thought that you would be a shadow dragon like your dad. But maybe because of your class you got a different one. She asked. Rue shrugged. Does this spell work on you? Kara nodded, then shifted, becoming a larger version of herself. A chaos badger the size of a small bear. No cute armor? Rue asked, confused. Kara laughed. Badgers come pre-equipped with armor. The princess wasn't sure how that worked. She didn't see armor. But Kara wouldn't lie to her. Prince Lucas sighed. So this is what has the palace in an uproar. Who is the swamp dragon? The swamp dragon gave an awkward draconic bow, flaring her wings as she dipped her head. My name is Myrtle, your highness. The maid assigned to refreshments in the envoy's rooms for the day. Lucas sighed. I should have known that not even the staff would be safe. But I see that you even got Barry involved. I've never seen him dressed up so elaborately. Nyx landed on his shoulder, and Lucas waited for an answer. Then the ferret licked up the rim of his ear, and Lucas hurled him across the room. Damn it, Nyx. The demon reluctantly dismissed the spell, and returned to his own form. That spell is fantastic, but you still knew it was me. We all got different forms, but the dragons seemed to just turn into better dragons. Only for me did it really show its full potential. Nyx explained. That is an interesting spell. But given that it's a class skill of the Beast Master line of classes, I shouldn't be too surprised that it doesn't work the same on bloodlines that are already considered to be a type of beast by the system as those that are not. Calling dragons beasts is rather insulting, but the system does view it that way, and we will get buffs that specifically target beasts, which can be convenient when working with rangers. Prince Lucas noted. Librarian Barry suddenly began to laugh, a slightly hysterical noise that drew everyone's attention. This spell. I get it now. Epic grade armor bonuses, epic grade constitution in a beast form, a chaos badger the size of a bear. It's an artifact grade spell, isn't it? You brought me here to show off an artifact grade spell that I can't learn. His laughter was becoming manic already, but his dragon form was too large for anyone to properly console him. Is there a protocol for stopping a librarian from having a nervous breakdown? Prince Lucas whispered to Nyx. I'm not sure. I think that it's all up to the World Dragon Emissary. Carl smiled at the despairing follower of the God of Knowledge. While the skill might not be one that is easily taught, how about I make you an item that can replicate the effect tomorrow? How would that be? You could use it, study it, and perhaps even use it to trigger someone to learn the skill themselves. What Carl didn't know was that it was actually possible in some rare cases to learn the spell that way. But also that at this point in the resurgence, the Blue Dragons had specialists who could slowly reverse engineer a spell from its activation sequence. If they used it long enough, they might learn how to cast it. So, putting it on a statue to give to him might not be as good as giving him a skill book that he could copy, but it wasn't all bad. Barry began to calm down, but there was still a manic edge in his eyes that the others didn't trust. If Carl didn't teach someone to use this skill, or make an item that could activate it, there was going to be hell to pay, and the librarian didn't care about the political fallout that might occur. So, the point of your experiment was to create a more powerful transformation spell? It seems that you have succeeded brilliantly, Prince. Lucas noted as everyone transformed back. Kara smirked at him. We were trying to find ways to turn Rue into a real dragon. It looks like it does work. Nobody would question that she was a void dragon if she used the spell. Why didn't you just use beast form? Lucas asked. That usually makes fully scaled dragonkin. The spell is more attuned to humanoid beastkin. Though green dragon clerics can be unpredictable. Carl informed him simply. Oh, I hadn't considered that. All of us learned to take humanoid form, so I had assumed that the beast form spell was the reverse. Barry smiled. Nothing about the class skills is ever quite as you expect it to be. But if the goal is just to turn Princess Rue into a full dragon, that's probably possible. The alchemists have a bloodline refining potion. Rue crossed her arms in a negative gesture. No permanent changing me. I like the idea of a transformation spell, though. Then I can be a dragon and also still be me, you know? Chapter 1386 Issues of the Monarchy. That was their great dilemma. Carl knew that the goal was to make Rue the queen of an entire nation full of dragons. Ones who valued draconic lineage and power above all else. So, if the world didn't see her as worthy, then it didn't really matter what they did. The people would never accept someone who was too weak or not dragon enough as their queen. At best, a concubine or consort of the king. Do you think that we're going to have problems with the queen? She definitely did not look happy with Rue's advancement. Carl asked Prince Lucas quietly as Kara, Nix and Rue got into a conversation about their day. 100% yes. But that is why father put her under my protection. The queen will be limited in the actions that she can take, and that will increase the odds that nothing permanent happens to Rue. After the incident in the dining hall, there is an opening where we might be able to shake some of her support among the elders and advisors. But the chances of anything major being done to stop her are low. The queen has too much power for that. The only thing that will really change is if the king orders her imprisoned as a threat to the royal family, or if he steps down and I take the throne early. Lucas replied. Won't she still have strong political influence as your mother? Carl asked. Oh, I'm not from her clutch. I am the firstborn prince. He explained. Carl frowned. I feel like there is a distinction that I am missing here. Barry chuckled from behind Carl, then moved to stand with them. What he means is, he was born before the king was crowned as king, and before he was married. His mother is the first concubine, a classmate of the king's from the Shadow Dragon clan. The librarian elaborated. Oh, so it's like that. Well, I can't say that I don't understand. The woman who would become my wife often spent evenings in my room while we were at school. So, there would be a very real chance that I might have ended up like the king, had our situations be reversed. Carl replied. How would you have handled it? Lucas asked curiously. I don't think that it would be an issue in my situation. You see, my wife is somewhat possessive. If another woman were a real threat, she would have gone missing. Don't take that the wrong way, she's really a lovely woman. When we went on training missions as students, I let her pick the group so she would be more comfortable. That led to our traveling group being the two of us, a female berserker and a nature priestess who are now longtime partners, and a war priestess of the Red Dragon. The librarian chuckled. No men to hit on her, and no women who were a threat to her position. Well, maybe the Red Priestess. They are known to be fond of violent men, and your aura really is something else. Carl nodded in understanding. Even when he tried to suppress it, his aura was influenced by the beasts. It wasn't as harsh as it once was, now that he had Tion and Leo who balanced out the ladies. But it was still intense and predatory. It took me far longer than it should have to realize that the only reason that she agreed to that group was because it worked out well for her. But in the end, it worked out for the others as well. He added, Is the Lady of the Red now an orphanage matron? Or did she stay on the path of battle? Barry asked. The path of battle. She's engaged to a lovely young man, and they were serving as the protectors of a coastal town on the southeast island the last that I talked to them. Carl deliberately left out the details, but it was enough for the others to form their own guesses. Both Lucas and Barry assumed that she had most likely gotten romantically involved with an orc, as they were presently the most common species on the southeast island. They got along well with the Red Dragon clerics, as both factions held similar outlooks on life. So it wouldn't be a bad partnership for her. But back on topic, the Queen is going to lose almost all her political influence when I take over, unless she can win me into her faction. However, I'm not the candidate that she has been backing for the position of Crown Prince. The second princess is the next closest candidate, as she is also a mythic dragon, and she actually made it there faster than I did. Her potential is extremely high. She is from the Queen's first clutch, and she shares her mother's ambition. Politically, we are rivals. Mostly friendly rivals, but it's not a secret that she wants the position from me. I've been able to hold it well so far, and I'm not too concerned about my foundation. The king supports me, and I've built a strong base within his faction. The real threat is to Rue. Plots, assassination attempts, another curse, or poisoning. Any and all of them are likely to happen, and now that she is studying under me, any of them that are too close to successful are a threat to both of us. Lucas explained. Barry nodded. The faster that Rue can gain skill points to fill out her tree, and at least one more advancement, the better. She started late, but if she shows extreme promise, then attacking her becomes less of a removal of political rivals, and more of an attack on the nation's potential. The best security that she could hope for would be a marriage proposal with a delayed timeline. That would let her grow, and would shield her from most of the threats, as she would be removed from political power outside her training to assist the Crown Prince. Nix pointed at his own chest. That's why nobody attacks me. I'm a demon. I'm not in line for anything but my current job. There are no more promotions that I qualify for, and nobody could realistically take my job by disgracing me. Chapter 1387 The True Path. Carl considered the options that they had for Rue. Getting her skill points wouldn't be easy, even if she managed to earn one on her own, just training with the combat maids. If the two most effective ways are a marriage alliance, or getting her to grow much more rapidly than her peers, the second option is certainly the one closer to my area of expertise. I don't even pretend to understand politics, much less international politics. So, I will focus on trying to get her a few more useful skills and then another advancement. With that, she should be on par with the prodigies her age, and I believe that with just a bit of work, I can optimize her potential. Carl decided. Optimize her potential? Prince Lucas asked. Carl nodded. There is a skill that I have for helping my beasts grow. If I use it on someone who is not a bonded beast, the effect will be different, but it should still be a marked improvement. 1 rank of maximum potential at the very least. So, if she's already got a strong enough bloodline to take her to totem rank, she could be a myth in the same time frame. Or, if she inherited enough of the king's potential to become a myth, it would give her the potential to reach immortality, though not the tools. But the tools can be trained. I'm sure that you all know that already. It's not exactly a secret what needs to be done. It's just not as easy to do as it is to understand. The 2 mythic dragons looked shocked at Carl's words, and he wondered if it was some sort of secret. Wait, don't tell me that nobody told you? Your myths you should have started way before now. In fact, how would you even make it this far without starting? Carl asked. Oh, we know the system's secrets to growth. But that's it. They're secrets. Nobody reveals them to us in advance. You have to find out from the system what method to mythical status is going to work for you. Librarian Barry explained. Carl frowned. Nonsense. You might not understand the fundamental rules or the design that others are using, but that is no reason that they shouldn't know the basics. I didn't learn it from the system. I learned it from a monk who was probably weaker than anyone on the royal family's staff. Of course, he hadn't understood the value of it then, but telling them that part would thoroughly ruin his point. Barry still looked skeptical, so Carl decided to do a demonstration. The first step is the same for everyone, I believe. First, you need to pick a focal object, and create a single point to channel mana through in your mind's eye. That clear spot you go to when you're focusing on the system interface or your inventory. My guess is that yours is most likely a book. Carl joked. That made the blue dragon laugh. Actually, you're not too far off. There was a tree in the paper forest near the temple where I grew up. I used to go there to read in the shade on nice days. I used a sapling of the paper trees as my focal point. Carl nodded. And I used a world dragon scale as mine. It's just a simple golden scale, easy to replicate. But that is where the methods diverge. We can easily teach young Princess Rue the first step, to get her on the path to understanding. But how it is done from there on changes. I use a constellation of points, arranged to represent a specific design. I am currently using 72 points in the constellation, and the amount of mana that I can pour through them to refine mana using my understanding of the fundamental rules is immense. You used a sapling, so my guess is that you are growing a tree with an increasing number of branches, and each of them ends in the same branch and bud as the original sapling. It's the same concept with a very different execution. If we teach it to those who are still far from the totem rank, who haven't begun to comprehend the fundamental rules yet, there is still a chance for them to increase their growth rate, and then realign their power matrix to align with their understanding later. The 2 older dragons frowned, and Prince Lucas began to speak slowly. How did you even get to 72 points? It took me a decade to go from 9 to 18, and I've been stuck there since, even though my understanding has improved. He asked. Carl nodded. The later steps are brutal. There are no small intermediate jumps with the constellation that I'm using. It's a straight doubling, and it requires an immense amount of power to rearrange them while creating the new points. The dragon nodded. That could be my issue. If I have to go straight to 36 points, I don't have the power to do the rearranging. I would exhaust myself before I finished. Carl shrugged. There are other ways, some with smaller steps, but they don't lead down the same path that I'm on. Some also intensify the existing points until they can be split. Then you get the doubling naturally and just need to rearrange them. Picking the path and method that you want is the hard part. And nobody can tell you what to choose. They can give you advice, but you can't actually do it by mimicking another exactly. Rue cleared her throat. What was that first step again? I don't understand. Kara laughed and sat down on the grass of the illusionary garden. Study session time. Nyx went to sit on one side of her, and Barry immediately moved to the other, while Lucas laughed. The badger knows the magic words. Carl nodded. Indeed she does. It's all good, though. I will lead the class since I'm a bit further down the path than most. I also have some insights into the process that others might have missed. The immortal Azov explained them to me when he was helping my wife. Chapter 1388 Power Matrix Training. And that was how the eclectic group found themselves sitting cross-legged and meditating when the maids came with breakfast the next morning. Sirs and madams, your meal is ready. The maid whispered. Please place it on the table in the garden. They will be up in a moment. We've just been working on our power matrix all night. Carl explained, used to keeping a bit of his attention separate while he was deep in meditation. If he didn't, who knew what the beasts would get up to? Kara laughed at his concern. She was far too good for a little attention split to catch her all the time. The smell of food slowly brought the others back to consciousness, and a slow smile spread across Rue's face as she tested her own progress. I think that I'm at the bottleneck of another advancement. This is wonderful. One day is all that it took for me to move through half a rank using this method, and I've only got one point of focus. Her voice was a hushed whisper, afraid to wake the others. But they were already becoming aware, and Prince Lucas was smiling at her. Perhaps we can put off our morning duties today. If you're at the bottleneck, we can help you break through, and then you will face everyone one rank higher than you were. It will be a great way for them to build faith in your abilities. The Crown Prince suggested. Rue nodded eagerly, ready to do whatever it took to start getting the respect that a princess deserved. Being chosen to help the Crown Prince with his duties was already a nice slap in the face to the older princes who certainly wanted such a prestigious position, but it was far from enough to feel satisfying. Carl smiled at her. All right, what we are going to do is to flood your body with mana one rank higher than you are. By common designation, that is royal rank energy. I'm not sure what it is called here. Probably a palace servant, or scullery maid or something. Rue laughed at his description. He wasn't wrong, but the way that he phrased it was just too funny. This was the palace servant rank she was reaching, and then would be the senior servant rank and the palace officer rank before reaching totem rank. It was just easier to describe power level by the jobs that they did. Carl began to flood her with royal rank mana, and Rue squeaked, startled by the influx. Focus on refining it through the focal point. It will make it faster to break the bottleneck, and then you can advance before lunch. He instructed. Kara nodded in agreement. Then I can dose you with a growth potion, and you will be almost to another advancement. No drugging the princess. Lucas and Barry shouted at the same time. Kara smirked, while Rue laughed. Though, given Remy's experimentation process, that was likely not the wrong call. More than once, emergency healing had been needed to keep test subjects from exploding. That was why she did it with healing totems active. New mana was forcing out the old in Rue's body, and her cells were adapting as quickly as they could. But that was painfully slowly in Carl's opinion. So, he cast trollish regeneration on her, and the breakthrough began to spread through her body at a rate visible to his enhanced eyes. Ah, that's better. The increased regeneration speed makes all the difference. I will have to have Remy add that to the next round of experiments. Carl declared. A friend of yours? Prince Lucas asked. The Naga Queen who is bonded to me. She's a mythic-ranked runic alchemist. Quite the brilliant researcher. Barry would like her. Probably not her methods, but they are both knowledge-obsessed. The Blue Dragon's suspicion was roused, so Kara decided to explain to him. The Naga Queen doesn't believe in intermediate steps, you see. She makes the potion, determines that it should work, then asks for volunteers. Barry nodded, then frowned. Wait. She doesn't test it on a construct or non-sentient creature first? Nope. You should have seen all the fun we had with her anti-baldness tincture. Carl laughed at the memory. Version 1 brought every hair that your body was programmed to grow up to full volume. For some species, that had some unexpected results. Though the Werbears seemed to truly enjoy it. Truly lustrous fur. Carl agreed. As they joked, Rue's power level stabilized at royal rank, and Carl made mental notes of the issues that they had found. Now that they had been given a chance to experiment freely on someone who was just starting out, They had collected much more data on how their techniques could be used to boost young people with high potential. If there were others with a high bloodline potential in the guild, they could do the same for them. Or perhaps for the hatchlings in the tiny world when they hatched. They would all be starting out with great potential, and a little boost would get them off to a great start without affecting their growth rate. They had proven that already with the potions that had been given out. It was just a matter of implementing them on a larger scale. Well, we have our advancement. Would you all like to tag along while I make my rounds for the morning? I will be taking Princess Rue to the training grounds to review the training of the security forces today. You're welcome to accompany us, if you are interested in our training methods, Prince Lucas suggested. Oh, that would be wonderful. I'm a big fan of sparring matches. Kara cheered, before looping her arm through Rue's. Lucas smiled. It's settled then. As soon as we are all fed and washed, we will go. Appearances matter, but they matter even more when we're trying to make an impression. Chapter 1389 Dress to Impress. To Kara, making an impression meant dressing to impress. She couldn't get away with letting Rue wear those simple dresses that were in her closet. They might be suitable for a young dragon, but they weren't up to Kara's standards of flamboyance, and certainly not up to Ray's standards of quality. The big sister would never forgive her if she found out that Kara had let an actual princess wander around wearing clothes that she didn't make. Ray had many princess-suitable dresses in her space. Kara was certain of it. The problem was that the spider was not here to tell her where anything was, and without her permission, Kara needed Carl to grab the stuff for her. Dressing as a princess wasn't something that Kara normally did, and she didn't have blanket permission to access the clothing, as Ray often saved pieces for specific people. They did risk messing up that system when they grabbed stuff for Rue, but Ray should understand when they got back. Fortunately, the Shadow Dragon royal family of Gthuzan normally wore blacks or grays as their formal wear, even the ladies. They didn't make for a brightly colored event, but Ray had a lot of it. But today was informally dressing to impress, and that meant bright colors, something to draw the eye to the freshly advanced princess so that everyone would notice. Let me pick something. I think I've seen just what we need, Carl informed the frustrated badger. There was a colorful pile of stuff in one of the large chests, and he remembered it all being very colorful and flashy. But when Carl opened it, he realized that it was all stuff that she had made for the Orcish Guild members. It wasn't princess dresses, but battle robes. Alright, new box. Here is another one full of... Nope, that's not for outdoor wear. How about this one? Here we go. It's a bit childish for the responsible princess vibe, but it's suitably fancy. Carl decided. They were leftovers from the dresses that Ray had made for the wedding, in many color samples, and in multiple layered designs. It might not be the style common in this age, but the dresses were all beautiful, and they all went with pale skin and dark hair. At least Carl assumed that they did. That was who they had been made for. What color do you like best, princess? Carl asked as he inspected the cast-off chest. Purple. Prince Lucas gave her a strange look, but Carl brought out a dress that had a black base covered in golden floral designs, and a gossamer purple outer. What about this one? I think that it should be purple enough and it will bond so you can change in and out with a thought. He offered. Rue held out her hands eagerly, and changed into the dress the moment that she got her hands on it. Wow, that's quite the fashion statement. Mythic ranked spider silk, and nether gold embroidery. Nyx gasped. I take it that you approve? Carl asked. I want it. The incubus agreed. Carl went to the next chest over, hoping for menswear. The two were logically side by side, and what Carl found inside the second chest was just as flamboyant as the incubus could have hoped for. Here, try this, he suggested. Out came an impossibly white double-breasted suit with vibrant violet embroidery weaving up the sleeves and pant legs. Oh, now we are talking. I don't even know how she got it that white, Nyx gasped. I think that she spins it that color and doesn't dye it later. If you like it, it's yours. Nyx snatched the suit, and then changed to match Rue. He picked the princess up and spun her as she laughed. We are going to stun them today, darling. Trust me, this is going to be wonderful. And your power level stabilized so far above the bottleneck that anyone who didn't know would think that you advanced months ago. I can't wait to see the look on the queen's face when she finds out. The incubus joked. Rue rolled her eyes. Please don't cause trouble with her. She already hates me. Prince Lucas patted Rue on her head, still in those impossible braids Kara had created. She will calm down soon. She should have gotten over it years ago, but I suspect that her seer-class family members told her something that made her bitter. He offered. Carl frowned. He had forgotten that the queen was related to seers. That would explain the hatred. The whole reason that Carl had been sent here was because of a vision, or perhaps an alternate future. If the seer had been focused on the queen, they had likely seen Rue killing her. The queen didn't dare to actually kill the princess outright, but she had cursed her to nullify the threat, and then held a grudge. However, now that Carl was here and helping her grow, that hatred and sense of danger was growing. She really might do something dumb. Carl changed into a black suit, then waited for Kara to change. A crop top and shorty shorts are not suitable for this event. He reminded her. But I like the breeze. So that was the reason. We're making Rue look good, remember? Why not just activate the armor, spell, and wear what it gives you? You can be her bodyguard for the day, Carl suggested. Kara tried it and ended up in leather armor with sandals, a top hat, and a sari. Right, too much chaos. I forgot that spell had an odd interaction with you. No, I kind of like it. The top hat is a nice touch. Try it again. You're guarding a princess. Carl insisted. The second try gave her tattered black jeans, black leather boots, a white tank top, and a bunch of gold chains with a flat cap. Ooh, I'm a debt collector. I'm totally keeping this one. Barry laughed at the tiny hooligan. You know, I think that the spell actually understands you better than you think. It might not get your sense of fashion, but it understands your personality. Kara nodded and brought out a smooth club to sling over her shoulder. Now I'm good. Carl, upgrade this for me. Chapter 1390, Impressing the Ladies. Carl laughed as he took the simple wooden club, made of totem ranked wood taken from the dungeon. He only carved one word into it, and the bat glowed with black energy. Perfect. Fear not, princess. Bodyguard Kara is ready. What does that rune say? Barry asked, confused as to what sort of spell or effect would work with only one rune. Bonk. It's a good rune. Perfect for stunning without killing, Carl informed him. The blue dragon looked shocked, but Kara was very pleased with her new bat. Stunning people was precisely what it needed to do, as she didn't plan to start smashing skulls in the middle of the day. Not while she was all dressed up. Prince Luca sighed as he changed into a less casual suit, and gestured at the food. I, for one, need something to eat before we go out. I suspect that this morning is going to be far more enjoyable for the badger than I would prefer. He insisted. Kara winked at him and Rue giggled. They were definitely going to cause chaos when she went out rank higher than yesterday. Their first stop of the morning was the training grounds for the palace's interior security force. So, it was full of highly skilled overlord-ranked warriors, and a lot of female staff members or minor noble daughters who had come to spectate. Watching shirtless men grapple will never stop being a peak pastime. Kara intoned in that strangely wise voice that Carl knew meant that her foresight skill had triggered, and she had seen something. A few of the spectators nodded, then did a double take when they saw who had spoken. Then again when they realized that Rue had advanced. Princess, congratulations. That is twice in the same month. A remarkable feat, if I do say so myself. The closest of the women informed her. Royal concubine Anath. It's a pleasure to see you this morning. Thank you for the well wishes. Rue replied formally, while the older woman smiled indulgently. Such good manners, not like those other brats. Everyone present knew who she meant. The teenage princes were terror around the palace, and not just to Rue. But now Rue was on the same power level as them, despite being years younger. If she was trained to fight, things were going to change around the palace, and the queen's youngest sons would find out very quickly that they were not as far up the social ladder as they thought, despite being sons of the legitimate queen. Perhaps I will be able to do some battle mage training with your grandsons in the near future? I know that I've got plenty of duties now, but I would welcome them to come to my tutoring sessions. Rue suggested. The concubine sons were older and much stronger, but as secondary princes, they had spent a much longer time in basic education, and were only now focusing on trade skills to complement their training as diplomats and bureaucrats. However, they had all gotten mage-type classes, and the whole palace was raving about Carl's new training area near the library. I will speak to them about it. Perhaps at the end of the week? If you're not busy before the family dinner, I'm sure they can find time. Anath offered. That would be lovely. If they're reluctant, you can tell them that we have a more extensive set of options in the private training area. Rue agreed. Prince Lucas smiled as Rue naturally began building alliances among the royals who weren't antagonistic to her. Those boys were also part of the king's faction and his own. So, they were excellent choices to bring to the training area for a social event. Another shadow dragon came over to them, and Crown Prince Lucas's smile turned from professional to gentle. Envoy, I don't believe that you've met my consort. She has been holed up in her nest with our first hatchling, the one I used the advancement potion on. He explained. The little one is asleep. She informed him quietly, before the crown prince kissed her forehead. It's a pleasure to meet you, Carl replied. Mildred is my name, common-born consort to the crown prince. She replied with a curtsy. Carl shrugged. I care little about birth status. Being the crown prince's chosen and mother to his heir is enough status for me. Kara nodded in agreement, while many of the nearby nobles gave Karl strange looks. That statement completely upended the hierarchy within the palace. A commoner could only rise so high. Or was Karl himself common-born? No, that couldn't be possible because the only world dragons in the world were all descended from a divine royal bloodline. Perhaps with his lineage it simply didn't matter as he was detached from the small details? Kara noticed the looks that many of the royal ladies were giving Karl, and decided that it would be more fun if she elaborated. You see, he's a 3-time over-ranked guild war champion of the Darklight host, a former city lord, avatar of the world dragon. At this point, background really does matter less to him than character. Besides, a few more years and he will be immortal, and who would argue if he declared himself king of some random territory? She joked. The crown prince's consort smiled. Well, that is certainly one way of looking at it. Is the envoy really that powerful? Kara's eyes went wide as mischief flashed into her brain with a vision. Why don't we gather the mythic guards and have a sparring session? It would be good for Rue to see if she's going to take over the job of approving training regimens. It's hard to appreciate what is actually necessary if you've never seen what the most powerful among us can do. Karl sighed. You know that there is nowhere suitable to actually hold that sort of sparring session if we're going all out. The dragons frowned at him. What sort of ego did this man have? The castle was made of mythic rank stone and enchanted with dozens of layers of protective barriers. What sort of battle would even scratch it? Lucas patted Karl on the shoulder. The badger has a point. She really should see them going all out. We have a training area with an immortal barrier, so if we work to reinforce it during the fight, you can go all out. Chapter 1391 Subdual Sparring. An hour later, there were nearly 100 mythic ranked guards and other militant sorts gathered on the training grounds, where Karl was waiting in the middle of a training ring. Thank you all for coming on such short notice. I am hoping to hold a training method demonstration for young Princess Rue today, using the scenario of a rampaging mythic dragon. We need you to go all out, just stop before you actually kill me, and I will return the favor. Without seeing what a fight between mythic dragons actually looks like, there is no way that the new training supervisor could possibly know whether a training regimen was actually going to be effective or not. Karl explained. How are we going to do this? The guard commander asked. I will be the rampaging dragon. You send a team to subdue me. Trust me, it will not be as easy as you are thinking. The commander didn't believe him, but if Karl wanted to show off for his student, then they would be happy to show the difference between a tutor and a professional soldier. The commander waved a team of guards forward, and Karl smiled. Then, he transformed into the avatar of the world dragon, and began casting buffs on himself. First, he upgraded his size and strength, then he activated eternal lightning, then he flew into the air above dodging the first attempts by the guard to physically restrain him. The amount of airspace within the training area was limited, but Karl wasn't trying to fly away. All he needed was to get his feet off the ground before the entrapment spells hit, and then he could launch his first set of attacks, a barrage of chaos blasts that rocked the training grounds and shattered barriers. The guards responded in full force as they realized that Karl wasn't just going to go easy on them and hold a mild demonstration. Those attacks might have killed a totem-ranked guard outright, and more than one of the guards had taken damage from them after their barrier fell. But what was really concerning them was the fact that if Karl started out with that level of firepower, what was he holding in reserve for later in the fight? Build the net. The team leader ordered, and the 5 dragons began to instantly cast a cooperative lightning cage around Karl. As soon as the 5 portions linked, they began to tighten it, but Karl was already in action, and Nullify broke him out before they could even realize that something had gone wrong. Then Karl was on them with Rend on his claws for an all-out scrap, like a feral dragon was likely to do. They loved to go for the physical damage, and when they were tied up with you in close combat, it was hard to get entrapment spells or other complex magic in place. The team leader flew back, using his wings to get some distance from the fight as Karl raked claws at chest height, narrowly missing him. That gave the others a moment to rain lightning on Karl, and eternal lightning flared with power. But that was far from enough to stop him, and the guards cursed as they realized the vast power difference between them. He's got too much mana for brute force. We're going to have to wear him down. The team leader insisted. But even Rue could see that was not going to be easy. Karl bombarded them with chaos blasts, forcing them to burn energy to keep their defenses up. Then, he used Earth Spike to cause the ground to erupt, sending everyone flying into the air, desperate to avoid impalement. Damn it, this guy's skills make no sense at all. Escalate the threat response. The team leader insisted. That meant calling in 5 more guards to help subdue Karl. And the guard commander laughed as 10 shadow dragons got into a magical slugfest with the world dragon avatar. They hurled spells at him. He sent waves of 30 and 40 spells out in return to block them. That wasn't going to work at all. But if they attacked while they built the net, and had someone close in on him so they could grapple the magically enhanced dragon, there was a chance. The largest of the guards grabbed Karl, grappling him as they clashed defensive barriers, trying to overcome each other without Carl being able to let up on his defense against the other's attacks. Then, the net formed and Carl was left with two options. Show off a massive nullification effect that would confound all conventional logic, or let himself be captured. At first, he tried a third way, a chaos blast, that tossed the close combatant away and shook the net as it wiped out a whole wave of attacks. But the attackers burned enough of the spell off that the net held with ease, and Carl was pinned to the ground, with his wings tight against his body. Just to prank them, Carl transformed back into a Tengu, and stuck his hand through a hole in the net so he could teleport away. The guards laughed at the move, and then cursed as Carl brought up a disintegration wall to block their attacks. Carl bowed to them, showing that the fight would normally be over once the dragon was captured, and Rue clapped enthusiastically. That was wonderful. Is that the difference between a regular constitution and an epic grade one? She asked. Partially, yes. I also have other advantages. But the amount of mana and power that I have are considered abnormal for even a mythic dragon. Carl agreed. That's why nobody messes with the avatars. We all have something up our sleeves. Dakarian agreed. Then he winked at Rue. Normally the answer isn't simply overwhelming magical power. But I can assure you that we are at least somewhat impressive. Rue giggled. I believe you, but I recognize some of those tricks as Kara's. The multiple chaos blasts for sure come from her. Chapter 1392 is not easy. I suspect that this version of going all out is still very restrained, but I think that Rue gets the idea. The guard commander joked. The princess was staring at the training area with a look that was very close to adoration on her face. The barriers around the training space for myths blocked the vast majority of their auras, and the overflowing energy, but the fight still shook the ground, made the air crackle with static, and warped the mana in the air so strongly that it felt like the world was going to end. That was awesome. Working together to take down a target without serious injury is a huge task. Like, just attacking them looked easy enough, but trying to capture someone alive is totally not. Rue gushed. The guards smiled as they realized that she had misunderstood the situation. It wasn't that they were only trying to subdue Carl with a trap. It was just that a trap was the only viable route, when he was so powerful that they couldn't physically restrain him. Are you satisfied? We could try a different scenario if you need. The guard commander suggested, amused by the difficulty that his team had trying to stop Carl from escaping them. With this new knowledge of their tactics, it would be even harder the second time. And that was good for their skills. No, I think that I understand the basics. The power level makes things much different, but the basic tactics don't change all that much, other than the need to adapt for many more types of skills that the target might use. Rue realized. That's right. The basic training doesn't change much, but the higher the rank, the more you have to add to it. There isn't an area that you can just overlook, because you're bound to run into someone who can use that skill that you overlooked. He explained. Perhaps the guard commander would like to join us for the rest of our tour? Carl asked. Oh, that's a wonderful idea. He can tell me all about how they chose which training to do. Nobody ever records that, they only record the final decision. Rue complained. The commander smiled at her innocent worldview. That's because nobody wants to get into the dirt and politics that make up most of the decisions that get recorded for posterity. So, they only ever record the outcome, and then they don't have to look bad for how they got to it. Rue nodded as if this was one of the great wisdoms of the world. I see now. Nobody wants to look bad in the records, so they only record the good parts. But isn't that a pain when you need real answers, or assistance with a problem? The commander shrugged. That's why you ask people directly and don't rely on the written record. One thing that we are good about is recording who made the report. So, if you can find them or someone who was there, you can fill in the details of events that happened in this generation. Beyond that, things get murky, and your best bet is to go to the oldest person you know who has encountered something similar. They will have likely done it the same way that the person you're thinking of did. The small details had all of Rue's attention, but Rue had everyone else's. The advancement was the talk of the palace today, along with her fashion sense, and Mildred, Crown Prince Lucas' consort, was basking in the glory. She was rarely invited to social events, other than ones for the entire extended family and harem, but Rue and Kara were happy to drag her along with them today, which was giving her a break from dealing with a fussy hatchling. Why don't I have snacks sent to your suite? Once we finish the rounds, we can have a nice break while the men talk about man things. Mildred suggested. Oh, that would be wonderful. I've got a gap in my schedule before afternoon training, so it should be just us. Rue agreed. Mildred called over a maid and whispered directions to her before following Kara and Rue toward the next group of palace staff that she was supposed to be inspecting today, so that she could understand their training methods. The men were the ones who were actually in charge. Rue was just a trainee while Mildred and Kara were just tagging along as protection and as spectators. The next few groups they went to watch were just palace servants, nothing dangerous or exciting, just torture for Rue, who had to finish her work before she could go play with her friends. So, When they sent a maid ahead to ensure that everything was ready for them in the illusionary domain garden that Carl had set up for Rue's training, the only thing on their minds were snacks. Rue had just turned the final corner toward their rooms when a massive explosion rocked the palace. Stone exploded outward, only blocked by Kara's quick reflexes as the entire section of the palace was shattered. Then, the roof began to collapse and everything went dark. Carl was with the guard commander Barry, Crown Prince Lucas, and a handful of servants from the last group they had inspected when the explosion shook the palace. For a moment, he sensed Kara's shock, then outrage from the badger. What happened? Is everyone all right? There was a brief pause before Kara replied. Not sure yet. Someone set off an anti-magic bomb in our rooms. The palace has collapsed on me, and I'm not sure where Rue and Mildred are, but they should be close. That was the moment when Barry realized what had most likely happened. But his first reaction wasn't for the three ladies, or the staff in that wing. The library. If they targeted your rooms, the library is only 2 floors down. He gasped. The Blue Dragon had his own priorities. Chapter 1393. Keep calm and Kara on. Kara's sensitive nose soon told her that she was not far from her young charge. The barrier she had erected wasn't a full dome, as it should have been, but she didn't expect someone to have the nerve to actually blow up the royal palace during an attack. So, when the collapse occurred, she only had a barrier between them and the room. However, Carl kept an eternal lightning barrier over Rue at all times, just in case of emergency. A precaution that was paying dividends now. Kara put disintegrate on her claws as she transformed, and began digging through the rubble in the direction that her senses said that she would find Rue. It had to be this way. She could still smell Carl's magic, and that was impossible to miss. Rue was only a few meters away from her, Kara realized. The floor had collapsed, which had dropped Rue and Mildred into the room beneath them, while the building collapsed. The destruction had caused most of the room to be left intact, with only a portion collapsed under the strain. So, when Kara cut her way through the floor, she found the other two huddled in a corner, intact, but highly stressed. Kara nudged Rue with her nose, as she couldn't speak in badger form, and the panicked dragonkin screamed. Right, she couldn't see in the dark. Kara's laughter told Rue who his was immediately, and she wrapped her arms around the furry miscreant. We thought that you were dead. The whole hallway collapsed, and you were gone under the rubble, she cried. Kara transformed back and gave the princess a hug. I'm fine. Not much gets through that barrier. How is Mildred? Kara asked. The consort smiled into the dark. Just a little beat up. I might not have had a barrier on me, but I do have defensive items. The question is how long it will take for someone to find us. The door is blocked with rubble. There is no light, which means little air circulation. So, if we remain in here too long, we will suffocate. Kara shrugged. I can dig us out, no problem. Someone made this place out of mythic rank stone, and it's a real pain to cut through, but I can do it. But I suspect that if we just wait here with a barrier over us, Carl will come and find us in a few minutes. He has the good earth magic, so he can move stones. Or, they can just go all dragon and hurl them away like in a drama. Mildred's panic began to fade at the assured tone of the badger's voice. Kara was so confident that they weren't in any actual danger, only inconvenienced by the fact that the door was blocked, that it was impossible not to follow her lead. All right, we wait here for your Carl. Why didn't you end up with us? Mildred asked. I was 2 steps forward. I fell into the next room, and that one is full of stone. The wall behind you stopped most of the direct blast from destroying this room. The secondary collapse sounded really bad, but I didn't have to cut a hole to start digging, so it's likely only a floor or 2. Badger logic was a wild thing, Rue realized. 2 floors of a stone palace landed on her, and she still viewed it as an acceptable level of damage. If we're waiting here, I think that we should use the time to try to understand who would want to blow up the envoy suite. If someone in the palace is trying to start a war with Saihosesa, we really need to know. An attack like this could cause the Supreme Lady to launch an all-out attack on us, and that would not be good for anyone. Best case scenario, she only sends her armies. Worst case scenario, she calls an army from the immortal realm to come and cleanse the area. Mildred whispered. Rue sounded panicked, but Kara didn't think it was that serious. I don't think that it was intended for Carl at all. More likely it was for the 3 of us specifically, and whoever said it didn't think that we would send one more maid ahead of us, when there were already 2 inside with snacks and refreshments. I am certain that they intended that bomb to go off when we were standing in the doorway, so it should be one of the 3 of us, and I would like to point out that even if I had been standing at the door, I wouldn't die. Well, probably not. But you get my point. Nobody would target a maid I haven't even met enough times to ask her name. And trying to assassinate Carl would most likely get everyone they've ever met brutally dismembered alive, then resurrected so that they could be dismembered again. So, one of us was definitely the target, and as Mildred already has a stable status in the palace, I am guessing that it's Princess Rue. Kara elaborated. Mildred nodded, while Rue looked horrified. Then, her expression faded to confusion. Wait, you said that you would not die from that explosion. But it shattered mythic rank stone, broke barriers, and the illusionary domain that Carl set. How could you live through that? Rue asked desperately. Whether it was for future reference or pure curiosity, Kara didn't care. It was keeping Rue focused on something that was not her imminent demise, so she could continue to stay focused. I am a Chaos Badger. First, I can transport myself to the Chaos Plane at will, so it's hard to fatally wound me. But more importantly, my level of regeneration allows me to have most of my body turn to ashes, and still regenerate to full health in only a few minutes, unless it has a fundamental law imbued into it to stop my healing. That's how I got these scars. A demigod was feeling cranky, and had an order-related natural law understanding, plus holy claws. Mildred smiled. This was not the time for that story. But she definitely wanted to hear it. Chapter 1394 Big Bang Theories. While Kara told stories to the girls, Carl and the majority of the palace guard were searching through the rubble of the palace, looking for survivors. Fortunately, most of the wing was unoccupied. However, with the new training area near the library, which was directly below the blast, there would be at least some people nearby. The access hallways were collapsed, but Carl could feel the mana fluctuations of many living creatures beneath them. I don't think that the barriers on the library broke. The training space that I made is also definitely intact. I can feel the spell, and I can sense the mana crystal that I put in the room. Both are fine. But the upper levels collapsed, which sent rubble out into the courtyard and blocked the door. We should start from the side to get to the library area for the majority of the survivors, and then I will head for where Kara is. That should be where the princess and Lucas consort are as well. It's not far from my suite, so it was close to the center of the blast. But they all had barriers on them. I cast it while we were waiting for the sparring to start. Better safe than sorry, right? Carl explained. You put a barrier spell on them? Oh, that is a relief. Mildred isn't nearly as strong as we are, and she's a shaman, not a warrior, so she's not physically strong. Lucas sighed. Carl sighed in relief. That also means that she has healing magic. If they were injured, she could heal them, and then they just have to wait for us to find them. How did you want to relocate the stone? Should we have a team pile it up? Or do you want me to just obliterate it until we get to the victims? The dragons flinched a bit at that. This is a historical building. Every stone in this wing is tens of thousands of years old, mined from a quarry that no longer exists. The loss of so much of it is already a tragedy, but deliberately destroying it is a crime that could land someone in prison for the rest of their days. I don't know what would have possessed someone to use a bomb, even if they were targeting you. Just knowing where they were and the consequences of that sort of decision should have been enough to stop them from doing something so monumentally stupid. Barry elaborated. You make a good point. If they thought that this might be the only way or their only choice, I can see them not caring about consequences. But they didn't target me. In fact, they didn't even bomb a room that I was supposed to be in. If I had pretended to be in the room but had actually teleported out or left with a portal, that could make sense. But we're in public. 100 people could see us at the time of the explosion. I think that they were targeting your bride, or possibly Rue. Carl replied, agreeing with Kara's deduction. The crown prince looked horrified. Who would target Mildred? She's so kind and gentle that everyone from the maids to the queen likes her. And the queen only barely tolerates most of the king's faction. The fact that she likes my Mildred is already a miracle. No, I think that someone is targeting Rue to stop her from rising to prominence, and they either didn't know or didn't care that there were others with her. Not to mention the staff. How many of them were lost today? Carl frowned. At least 3 is my guess. There were 2 sent to the room, and then 1 accompanying the ladies. That 1 might be fine, depending on where they all were when the explosion occurred. But the 2 inside the room are almost certainly not. The illusionary domain collapsed, which means that the damage had to have been severe. I built it with reality warp, so everything in there was a solid object. To destroy the illusion was not an easy feat. As Carl listened in on the conversation that Kara was having with herself, planning ways to torture whoever tried to ruin her plans for the day, he also realized that they hadn't just blown up the illusion, they had used anti-magic to remove it before the bomb went off. Removing the illusionary domain would have been a secondary effect. The intended purpose was to remove any protective magic or barriers on the targets before the attack. Insidious. However, the ladies weren't close enough to be hit with that part of the attack. It had been mostly contained within the illusionary domain, and what escaped was only enough to take out the wards on the room itself. Your domain, is it a spatial warp effect? It occupies much more room than it should, but I don't understand just how it works. The prince asked as they rushed to the scene. Sort of. It's not space element, more like it partially removes the area from reality. If you walk out an unprotected edge, you'll end up wherever you should have been in reality. That's why I put a barrier around the outside. If I didn't, Then there was a chance people could leave and find themselves in someone else's room. That wouldn't make you a whole lot of new friends, and certainly not in a good way. But in this case, it might be the key to survival. You see, if the timing is off and they collapse the illusion before the detonation, then there is a chance that the people who were present at the time of the explosion are actually multiple rooms away. If they were flying, they might have appeared outdoors, but more likely they were in one of the nearby suites on this level, or the one below it, as the garden has a lower level. Carl elaborated. The rescuers breathed a sigh of relief. There was a chance, however slim, that there were survivors, and that they hadn't just lost a member of the royal family, plus an unknown number of other nobles, staff and guests, to a terrorist attack. Chapter 1395 Rescue Teams. Rescuers swarmed toward the site of the blast, everyone eager to help, and that meant someone needed to organize them. The palace guards were not in any position to organize a rescue effort at that moment, with their minds focused on the location of their members assigned to this wing. So, the duty fell to the Crown Prince as the ranking royal in the area. Everyone, take the far stairs down 2 levels and start near the library. Check for damage and work your way up. We have reason to believe that the library itself, as well as the new training ground near it, are intact. If you find anyone wounded, please take them to a safe location. We will have healers stationed on top of the rubble, as well as on the outer perimeter of the damaged area. If you have secondary healing skills and are not assigned to the perimeter, please join a rescue team to perform emergency medical assistance. Nobody is to work alone. Buddy up and go in groups of at least 2. If you find a survivor, someone will need to stabilize the area, while the other determines the best way to extract them without further injury, he announced. Many of the dragons had rushed out before he was finished speaking. They had heard it all before, though not in the context of an attack on the palace. However, the nation did suffer from occasional natural disasters, and any of the older dragons had seen at least a few earthquakes and likely a tsunami or volcanic eruption as well. Carl gestured to a spot on the pile of stone. If we start there, we should be closest to where the ladies are. I can still sense Kara's position, and while the palace did collapse, she appears to be fine. If we find her, we should find the others quickly enough, and then we might get some answers about what happened. The others took him at his word, as a link through the system was bound to be more accurate than their guess about where everyone might have been at the time of the blast, or where they had ended up if they were displaced by the breaking of the illusionary domain. However, given the nature of the work, Lucas still called over a dozen guards to help clear the area, moving the stone onto stable spots that had been checked, or down into the courtyard below. Everything would need to be rebuilt and renovated anyhow, so there was no real harm in piling stones on the hedge gardens, as long as they didn't shatter the fountains. Those were antiques from the time of the palace's building, and it would be a tragedy to lose them to careless construction work. How many floors were above us? Carl asked, unfamiliar with the palace layout. Just 2. You were near the top, and that portion of the rubble used to be your patio. There are already teams there, as it's the source of the blast, but it won't be fast. They're more focused on determining the cause and finding signs of the culprit, as they're not expecting to find survivors that close to the blast. Lucas explained. He had a point. Most of the massive stone blocks that made up the palace walls had been reduced to gravel and dust. The blast hadn't spared anything. The workers quickly moved the stone to the side, digging toward the location that Carl had informed them should find the princess. It was an organized team effort that had him highly impressed with their professionalism. At least until he heard them talking. We had better find Rue alive, man. I mean, she's a bit of a dork, but if the king finds out that someone managed to assassinate her, nobody who was on shift today will be spared. One of them whispered. Not just the ones on duty today. Anyone who had interacted with them will be under investigation. How the hell would someone manage to pull this off without alerting the guards? His coworker replied. The 2 dragons sighed as they carefully relocated the stone, and then froze as they heard a cry for help. Your Highness, I hear a voice. Off to the north, it sounds like it is some distance away, and on this level. A guard called from the bottom of the hole. Go find them. Just be careful with the unstable stone. Prince Lucas agreed. Then, the ground rumbled under their feet, as if confirming his warning. But it was not a collapse. They had stopped 1 stone away from the collapsed floor above the room that Kara and the others were in, and the badger had run out of patience. I hear them too. I think it's one of the maids we had on duty. Help me get these 2 out of the rubble and I will dig. She insisted. Madam, the stone is a relic. Please don't dig holes in it if at all possible. The guard replied. You're worried about the stone? I can get to the survivor in like 10 seconds. We were just waiting for you so we could leave without causing a collapse. Kara complained. We will ensure that the survivors are rescued in a timely manner without causing additional damage to the structure. This wing of the palace is already unstable, and we are concerned that any more damage will cause lower levels to collapse as the stone shifts, and that could damage the library's contents, or trap the people who are currently evacuating from the new training area. Kara sighed as she helped Mildred up, and then grabbed Rue in her arms and flew out of the destroyed room. Fine, do it your way. But if she starts sounding like she's desperate, I will come and take her anyhow, Kara warned. Understood, Mississippi. Rue made a mental note of Kara's tone. It might be that she was strong, but when she spoke, people listened and obeyed. That was something that she needed to learn as well. The sooner she could master it, the sooner she could start getting revenge. Not just for her childhood, but for the people lost in the attack today. Hello everyone, this is Shadow. Due to copyright restrictions on YouTube, I can't publish many of the audiobooks you love. That's why I've created a special paid service where you can enjoy over 300 high-quality audiobooks from platforms like Webnovel, Pocket FM, Audible, Wuxia, and more. Each novel comes as a one-time purchase, no subscriptions, no hidden fees. After payment, you'll receive full access via Telegram, along with all future updates for that novel. You'll find a wide selection of your favorite genres and titles, always in premium audio quality. Check the full list of available novels in the description. DM me now to get your favorite stories in audiobook form and start listening today.